Hey everyone, thanks for joining Learn to Play Games. My name is Lance, and today I'll be teaching you how to play Bloodborne, the board game. This is a brand new one from CMON Games. It is a 1 to 4 player game that takes roughly an hour to 2 hours to play, and is a fully cooperative game where all the players are working together to defeat the scenario they've chosen to go on. In this video I'll teach you how to play, starting with components, setup, player turn, endgame conditions, and additional rules. As always, if you find these videos helpful, if you like what I do, please consider hitting that like button and subscribe to my channel. It's one of the easiest ways you can support channels like mine so we can continue to grow and produce this content. I also have a couple of surveys going on right now if you are just catching this video as it is released, as I'm looking to do a 3-video series playing through one of the campaigns within the game itself. I'd love to have some feedback on that. Let me know in the comments below or in one of those surveys which campaign you would like to see me play through. So with that being said, let's go ahead and head to the table and I'll teach you how to play. First, I want to take a look at the 3 small decks of cards that players are going to be interacting with throughout the game. The first are consumable cards, and these are single-use cards. Each one of these will list the name of the card at the top, an image of the item, and then when it can be used, and there are 2 different times. On-attack cards can only be used during the first step of combat when a player is selecting their attack, and the hunter turn cards can be used at any point during the hunter's turn, either before or after an action is taken. Each one of these cards will also list the effect of that card. When a player uses a card, it will be discarded to the discard pile, and a player can have any number of these cards. The second deck of cards are the reward cards, and players will gain these throughout a campaign as they complete missions, and there are 2 different types of rewards. We have the Cariel Ruin and the Hunter Tools, and each one of these on the back is going to list the name of the card, when it can be used, and the effects of that card with a little bit of backstory on that or flavor text. These are not single-use cards, and when a player uses one of these, they're simply going to flip it over, and then when they go to the Hunter's Stream, they'll be able to flip it back over. Now, there are a limit to the number of these cards that a player can have, which they can have 2 of the Ruin cards and 2 of the Hunter's Tool cards. And the third deck of cards are the upgrade cards. When a player goes to the Hunter's Stream, they must spend their Blood Echoes to gain some of these cards to improve their deck. And these are broken down into 4 different types. Green Endurance cards, blue Skill cards, black Strength cards, and purple Vitality cards. And I'm going to go into more detail about these during the Hunter's Dream step. Players are also going to be interacting with one standard deck of cards, which is going to be the campaign that the players have chosen to go on. For this video, I'm going to use the Long Hunt, and so with this deck, I'm going to gather that up, and it's going to contain a number of different types of cards. First, you're going to have an introduction card, which on the back of that card is going to give you a basic backstory for this particular campaign. Then each campaign is going to contain a number of chapters in it, so with this one we have 3 separate chapters. Each one of these cards is going to give you the basic setup instructions for the enemy groups you're going to be using, the tiles that are included in this one, and then on the back of the card is going to be the different instructions when you're interacting with it throughout the game. Then you're also going to have a deck of mission cards. You do not shuffle this deck, and throughout the game it's going to list when to reveal cards from that deck and what number card to reveal. Each mission deck is mainly going to contain 3 different types of cards. The first 2 are the 2 different types of mission cards you're going to run into, which are going to be hunt missions with the red icons on the side, and then insight missions, which will have these skulls on the side. Each mission card is going to list the name of that mission and a brief backstory about it. Each card will also have instructions, such as having you reveal additional cards, placing out different tokens and monster groups, and other effects that will be active while the card is in play. At the bottom of each card in red is going to list the way that you can complete that mission, and then if you have to reveal additional cards afterwards. Once you've completed all the steps in a mission, you will reveal an insight card, which is going to have the name of the card, the rewards that that card grants you, and an additional part of the story. Moving over to the enemy cards, each enemy's card is going to list the name of the enemy at the top, the number of hit points it has, and that enemy's image. Underneath that are the 3 different attack types for each enemy, which are basic, special, and ability. Each one of these attack types is going to list the speed of that attack, with fast attacks having 3 arrows, medium attacks having 2, and slow attacks having 1. Each attack is also going to list the amount of damage it does, and then any effects or conditions of that attack. For example, with the Scourge Beast, his special is going to do stun, and it cannot be dodged. With abilities, they're going to either be attacks or have other effects that the player must resolve. And then some enemies are also going to have special rules at the bottom of the card. Each enemy's card is also double-sided, which during setup you're going to be placing each one of the enemy types out randomly, and that is going to have an impact on your game that you play. Each hunter is going to have a double-sided trick card. Each side is going to have an image of that hunter, and then some of the sides will have a special ability for that hunter on that side, and then we'll have one or more attack slots on it. Each attack slot again is going to list the speed of that attack, the name of the attack, and the amount of damage it does. On the bottom of the card is going to show a quick reference to the opposite side. So if we flip it over, this side is completely different for this hunter. So the player is going to have to work throughout the game to decide when and in which situations are best to use each side of his trick card. To set up the game, the first thing you're going to do is choose the campaign that you want to play. And for this video, I'm going to be using the Long Hunt, as that is the one that is recommended in the book. From there, then you're going to reveal the top card of that deck and read through the backstory to set the mood for this campaign. Then you're going to choose the chapter you want to play, and for this video I'm going to be using the Chapter 1 card, and this is going to list the setup that you're going to need for this card. First off, we're going to start with the tiles, so you're always going to use the central lamp tile, and then you're also going to gather all the rest of the tiles that is listed on the card. So for this one, we're going to need the courtyard lamp, the occupied house, the chapel, and the ransacked house. Then finally at the bottom of the card, it's going to list a number of random tiles that we're going to gather. The symbol on there means the number of hunters that are playing, so I'm going to set up my game for 2 hunters. So that means I'm going to use 2 times 2 random tiles, or 4, with a maximum of 6. So if I was playing with 4 hunters, I wouldn't gain 8 tiles, I'd only gain 6. So I'll go ahead and draw 4 tiles from here. Let's do that one, this one, and we'll go with that one. Any other tiles that you did not use for that, you can go ahead and return to the box, as you won't be using them for this game. And then you can gather up the tiles that are listed as well as the random tiles you pulled and give them a good shuffle. For player setup, each player is going to select 1 or more hunters that they want to play as. For each hunter that they select, they're going to gain that hunter's trick weapon and the miniature for that hunter. Then each player will select 1 color for each of their hunters and gain the color clip of that color and the dashboard. From there, then the player is going to set up their dashboard by gaining a number of hit points, and each hunter will start with 6 hit points. Each dashboard is also going to have a spot for blood echoes. Throughout the game, as players defeat monsters, they're going to gain blood echoes, and they can never hold more than 3 at any one time. Players are also going to have their starting firearm, and each hunter will have their own with their image at the top corner. That card is going to list the name of that weapon along with what it can do. With this one, it's going to be able to stagger an enemy when it does a basic attack. When a player uses their weapon, they'll flip it over to their used side, and from that point on, that weapon cannot be used again until it is refreshed by either taking care of the bottom condition, or if a player goes into the hunter's dream, they'll be able to flip that back over to its active side. Each player will start by selecting which side of their trick weapon they want to have face up, and finally each player is going to construct their starting hunter deck by gaining the 12 cards, 3 of each of the 4 different types of basic cards, and you can identify that by the word basic in the top corner as well as the icon at the bottom of the card. So each player is going to gain 3 basic green endurance cards, 3 basic blue skill cards, 3 basic black strength cards, and 3 basic vitality cards. From there, then the player can gather up all these cards and shuffle them up to be ready to start the game. The first step in setting up the hunt board is to reference the chapter card you're using. Go ahead and look at the enemy groups and gather up the card for each one of those enemies. From there, then you're going to shuffle those enemy cards up and randomly place them on the board, randomly choosing which side of the card you're going to use as well, trying not to look at them. Once you have that, then you're also going to set up the enemy cards, and the enemy action deck is going to be comprised of 6 cards. You're going to have 3 basic cards, 2 special cards, and an ability card. With these cards, you're going to go ahead and shuffle them up and then place them off to the side somewhere so that you can draw them as the enemies attack. Next, go ahead and grab the upgrade deck, go ahead and shuffle that up as well, and reveal the top 4 cards of that deck to create your upgrade selection when players go into the hunter's dream. The rest of the deck can be placed off to the side. You're going to do the same thing with the consumables deck. Go ahead and shuffle that up and place that out off to the side as well. And then finally, the rewards deck does not need to be shuffled up, and you can place that off to the side. And then go ahead and place the hunt track marker on the starting space of the hunt track. From there, then you can go ahead and grab the chapter card you're using and flip it over to its mission side and place it on the chapter starting spot. With the rest of the deck, you can go ahead and return any other chapters that are not being used to the box, and then the rest of the cards can be placed out next to that location. From there, you can also give each player a player aid, and then you're also going to place out any other tokens you're using for this game. Finally, each player can place their miniature on one of the starting locations on the central lamp tile, so I'll have my guys start there. And then finally, each player can draw 3 cards from their deck. With these cards, you can keep them in your hands, or this is a fully cooperative game, so you can place them out so all players can see. So with my players, I'm going to go ahead and place those over to the side, and we're ready to begin the game. Bloodborne is played over a set number of rounds. During each round, each player will get to take a turn, and this is going to continue round after round until either the players are able to complete the current chapter that they're playing, or the players are required to move the round marker and they are on the last space of the round track, in which case the players have lost and they will have to start the campaign over from the very beginning. Now we're ready to move into the game, so the final step we need to do before moving into the players' turns is to reference our chapter card and check for the start of the hunt, and this is going to tell us what card to reveal. So with this one, it's going to have us reveal card 1, so we're going to go ahead and do that, and this is a hunt mission, and then there's some backstory to it, so you can go ahead and read that, and then at the bottom of the card, it's going to list what we need to do next. So with this one, we have to end our move on the central lamp tile, and we have had to have collected at least 2 insights, which means that we have to complete at least 2 of the side missions or other missions that we're going to find as we move around the town. Once we've completed at least 2 of those, when we make it back to the central tile, with those, then we're going to reveal the next card that's listed here. So we have to reveal card 2 from that deck. So we're going to go ahead and place this off to the side as that is our main objective for right now. Then we are ready to move into the players' turns. And this is done in any order you want to, and this can change from round to round. So as the players, you're going to discuss this and decide which player is the best player to start the round, each round, or however you want to do it. From there, then you'll move into that player's turn, and each player's turn is consisted of 2 steps. The first step is the player's turn itself, where the hunter will get to take a number of actions, and then you'll move into the enemy activation step of the player's turn. Once that is done, then you'll move on to the next player. So the first thing we're going to look at is that very first hunter's turn and how it's broken down. I selected the green player to be the starting player for this round. Moving into that player's turn, it's broken down into 2 steps. The first step is the hunter turn. During this step, the player is going to discard stat cards from their hands or in front of them, depending upon how you selected to play, to carry out actions. Each stat card you discard will let you carry out an action of your choice, and there are no limitations on the actions. You can take the same action any number of times as long as you have stat cards to discard to do so. Now there's a couple important things with this. First off, with attack actions, instead of discarding the stat card, you're going to place it in an open slot on your trick weapon, and I'll cover that more during that step. The other important thing is that the stat cards are going to have effects that are on them, and those are normally only going to be carried out during attack actions when the card is placed on an open slot and not when discarding a card unless the card specifically says otherwise. For example, with Second Wind, this one says when used for non-attack actions, you're going to heal 2. So in that situation, you would carry out that action, but normally you will not, such as with this basic Vitality card, you would not get to draw a card, discarding it to carry out an action other than an attack action that is placed on your attack section. From here, let's go ahead and take a look at each one of the actions in more detail. Before getting into the movement action, I want to take a quick moment to break down tiles themselves. So each tile is broken down into a number of different spaces that are separated by these gray lines. For example, with this central lamp tile, it is broken into 3 spaces, 1, 2, and 3. Each tile is also going to have a number of different icons on it, including lamp icons, monster spawn points, and consumable icons, among others, and I'll cover those more in detail later in the video. Some tiles are going to be named tiles, as well as having different interaction points or effects, and each tile is going to instruct you how that works, whether that targets a specific space on that tile or the entire tile. You're also going to find exit points on these tiles, which are the little blue stairways. These are going to be how the players are going to be able to move off of that tile, exploring more and more of the map, and I'll cover that more during the movement step. Each time a hunter performs a move action, that allows the hunter to move up to 2 adjacent spaces. A space is considered adjacent to another space if it is separated by a gray line, or if it is connected to another tile with an exit point on both tiles. So for example, if we connect these tiles, This space is considered adjacent to that space as they are connected by these exit points. This space is not connected to this space as there are no exit points connecting them, or if we turn this tile, then this space is not considered adjacent to either one of these spaces as there is no exit point connecting the two. Also, if tiles are diagonal to each other, these spaces are not considered adjacent as, again, there is no exit point connecting them. Let me show you a couple examples of this now. So first, a basic example. Let's say that our green hunter wants to move into the same space as the purple hunter, so he's going to discard a stat card and he can move up to 2 spaces into her space. As his next action, let's say he wants to do another move action to explore a new tile from this exit point here. So again, he'll discard a stat card, and then since there's no tile here, we'll draw a new tile from the supply and line it up so that its exit point lines up with our exit point. And we can do this in any manner we want to, as there are 3 different exit points on this tile. We can arrange it any way we want. So let's do it like this. And then from there, before the hunter continues his move action, we have to take care of any icons on there. So we have 2 monster spawns. So we're going to reference the hunt board. And first off, with the yellow spawn points, we're going to be placing a Scourge Beast on there. And then with the purple spawn points, we'll do a Huntsman's Minion on there. From there, then our hunter can continue his turn. So he has 2 movement points he can spend. So the first one will be moving on to here. And then the second one, he could go into one of these spaces. He does not have to, as you do not need to spend all of your movement points. But if you choose to do another action, then any movement points you have remaining are lost. So he cannot perform an attack action, say if a monster was in here, and then after that attack action, use that last movement point to move into another space. There's 3 other important things I want to point out with movement. So first off, anytime you're required to spawn an enemy and you're out of that enemy's type in the supply, take one enemy of that type from anywhere on the board that is furthest away from all hunters and use that enemy. Next, enemies are not going to idly stand by as hunters move around the board. Anytime a hunter moves out of the same space as a monster or out of a tile containing monsters, after that hunter resolves its movement, then all enemies on that tile are going to pursue that hunter, moving 1 space following the same path as a hunter. So if we look at an example of this, let's say as the last action, our green hunter moves 1 more time, moving 2 spaces. He moved out of a tile containing monsters, so now each monster is going to move 1 space towards him following that same path. So our minion will move up 1, and then the Scourge Beast is going to move up 1 as well. The Scourge Beast also has a special rule. Anytime it activates or pursues, it moves 2 spaces instead of 1, so it would move an additional space towards that hunter. Now this can be a very important tactic as players are going to be able to manipulate the enemies to their advantage, moving them around the board and moving them out of potential spaces that other hunters are in, or setting them up into traps or whatnot to take full advantage of the player's abilities. A hunter's movement is never affected by enemies in his space, so a hunter can freely move out of a space containing enemy models. And the final thing is anytime a hunter reveals a new named tile, they're going to reference the chapter that they're playing to see if that triggers an effect. For example, with this one, if we end our move on the occupied house tile, we're going to reveal card 8 and follow its instructions. There's going to be a couple of different situations where players are going to want to perform an interact action, such as interacting with consumable tokens on the board, certain spaces on the board, and even some mission cards will require a player to perform an interact action. In order to carry this out, the player is going to discard a stat card from their hand as normal, and then interact with any of the different tokens or mission card or anything that is on their current space. They don't have to do an interact action per token or per thing that is in their space that they want to interact with. So if we look at an example of this, with the Green Hunter, he has 2 consumable tokens in this space. So in order to do that, he'll discard a stat card, and then he can take both of these tokens away, removing them from the board, and then he'll get to draw a consumable card per token. Now this space does have a special ability, which it says when interacting with one of these tokens, it may be used to gain a Blood Echo instead. So instead, the player can gain 1 Blood Echo and 1 consumable card that they'll add to their area. Now, a player does not have to interact with everything on his space when he performs an action, so if he wanted to leave one of these for another player, he could have done that as well. The other important thing is if an enemy is in your space and you wish to perform an interact action, you can still do so, but the enemy is going to get a free attack on you, so you'll reveal an enemy card and carry out that attack. Now, when resolving the attack, your player cannot perform an attack against that monster, and he also cannot dodge against that monster's attack because you're too busy picking up these things. If the hunter survives, then the hunter can carry out that interact action as normal. Another type of action a player can perform is to transform their weapon. They're going to want to do this at certain points during the game, as they cannot perform attacks or dodges if there are no open spaces on their trick weapon card. And they're also going to want to do this to have access to different types of attacks. So to do that, they're going to discard a stat card as normal to their discard pile, and then any cards that they have on their trick weapon now can be removed and discarded as well. And then you must flip over your trick weapon anytime you transform it to its other side. Now, you do not have to wait till a trick weapon is completely filled in order to transform it. The next action I'll look at is an attack action, and this is going to work pretty much the same way whether a hunter is attacking an enemy or an enemy is attacking a hunter. In either situation, you're always going to resolve the same 4 steps that are done in order. The first step is selecting a stat card from your hands, and instead of discarding the card, you're going to place the card into one of your empty slots on one of your attacks in your weapon, which also means that if you do not have any empty slots on your trick card, you cannot perform an attack action. So in this example, I'm going to go ahead and play this card here, and I'm going to go ahead and do a slow attack. So I'll place that in there. And then from there, some of the cards are going to have effects on them as well. These are going to be resolved immediately unless it is an effect or something else that is added to an attack, at which point then that is going to be resolved during that attack's resolution step. Also, some cards will specify when their effects are resolved as well. So with this one, we're going to draw one card from our area and place it in our hands. At this point, if a player has a consumable card that lists on attack, this is the last opportunity that player has to use that card for this attack. This also means that you will not be able to see your enemy's attack before committing one or more of your consumable cards to that attack action. The second step in this process is to reveal an enemy action card to determine what kind of an attack or if the enemy is going to trigger their ability. So let's go ahead and do that and flip it over, and it is a special. So now we know that the hunter mob is going to do a special attack, and this is going to be resolved in the same way that a hunter's attack is going to be. There's a couple other things I want to point out with this. First off, the enemy action deck is never going to be reshuffled unless you have to draw a card from the action deck and there are no cards left. In this way, the players can kind of predict what kind of actions or attacks the enemy can potentially do during their turn, as they know the makeup of the action deck. Once you've revealed the enemy's action card, then you'll move into the third step where the hunter has an opportunity to dodge. If the hunter player has any stat cards with the keyword dodge in them and an empty attack slot, they can choose to play that card in there to dodge the enemy's attack. Now they must play a dodge card in a slot that has a speed that is equal to or greater than the enemy's speed of their attack in order to be able to dodge that attack. So with our hunter player here, he does have a dodge card that he can play, and he will go ahead and play it in this slot here, as that is a medium speed, and our enemy is using a special attack, which is a slow speed, so it is faster than the enemy's attack. So at this point, then we will not take any damage from the enemy's attack, and we will not suffer any effects of that attack. Now this card also has that we will clear this slot, so you can clear it immediately, or you can wait until after the attack is resolved to clear it, however you want to do it. And the final step in this process is to resolve the attacks. You're going to do this in order from the fastest attack all the way down to the slowest. If the attacks are tied for the same speed, you'll resolve them simultaneously, dealing out any damage and effects that are applicable. In the example that we're looking at, both our hunter and the enemy mob played attacks of the same speed, so we would normally resolve them simultaneously, but the hunter did play a dodge card, so he dodges that entire attack and status effects. So in this situation, all we have to do is resolve the hunter's attack. So he does 3 damage to the enemy mob, so we'll place 3 damage tokens on there. If the hunter had done enough damage to defeat the mob, then we would have removed the miniature instead, and the hunter would have gained a blood echo token that he would add to his board. Now, each hunter can only hold a maximum of 3 blood echoes, so if you defeat an enemy and you already have 3 blood echoes, you will not gain an additional 1. The other important thing to point out with this is if a hunter takes damage, you'll remove points from his HP. If he ever has to remove a point and he does not have any left, he has been killed momentarily. He will lose any blood echoes he has, placing them back in the supply, and then his miniature will be added to the hunter's dream to resolve later on. A couple other important things I want to point out with this, with both the hunter and the enemy, if either one of them do enough damage to defeat the other one before their attack is resolved, then you will not resolve that attack. So let's go ahead and say, for example, instead, that our enemy already had a couple of hit points on them, and our hunter had played the medium attack instead. So his attack was actually faster than the enemy's, and so he would deal his damage first, doing 2 additional damage to that enemy, eliminating that enemy before their attack would be able to be resolved, as it is a slower attack. So you would not resolve it in that situation. And the same is true for the hunter. If the enemy was able to defeat the hunter before his attack was resolved, then his attack would not be resolved either. The one other thing I want to point out when selecting a stat card for an attack action is that you can use cards that have the dodge ability on them, but you just won't resolve any of those effects. So you can still use them as attack cards. Again, you just won't be able to use the dodge effect, but if the card has any other effects, you will be able to resolve those as normal. On top of doing damage, some attacks are also going to add status effects, and there are 4 main ones that I want to take a look at. The first of which is Stagger. With this one, it is going to cancel opposing attacks with a slower speed, completely preventing all effects and damage from that attack. So let's look at an example of this. Let's go ahead and say that we're going up against this hunter mob, and our player decides to play this card here on there. So he's going to do a medium attack that is going to cause the stagger effect. From there, then the enemy mob is going to reveal that they're playing a special, so they're going to have a slow attack that's going to do a lot of damage. But with our attack, it is going to be resolved first, and it'll do the stagger effect, so it completely cancels the enemy's attack and any effects that are attached to that. Let's say, for example, instead that our enemy had done a basic attack. So at this point, it is the same speed. So our hunter and the enemy are going to resolve their attacks simultaneously. And so the stagger will not come into play because it is not a slower speed attack that the enemy is using. Next, we have stun. So let's say that our enemy did get that stun off, and with that, the hunter must discard 1 card from their hands, and if they can't, if you do not have any cards, then you will take 1 damage. The next one is Frenzy. So if an attack does Frenzy, you're going to gain a Frenzy token, and then from that point on, the hunter is going to suffer an additional damage from all attacks that he takes. So for example, with this one again, if we do that basic attack, instead of doing 2 damage, the hunt mob would do 3. And the last one is Poison. With this one, at the end of each hunter's activation, they're going to suffer 1 damage. And one of the ways to get rid of these tokens is to go to the Hunter's Dream, where you'll be able to remove 1 of each of these. And you can only ever have 1 of each one of the tokens, so you can only have 1 Frenzy token and 1 Poison token at any one time. Now, boss battles are going to work a little bit differently. They have a couple of additional components. First off, you're going to have a boss card that is double-sided. It's going to have Phase 1 and Phase 2 on it. And each one of these phase cards is going to list the number of hit points based on the number of hunters that are playing. So with a 2-player game, the Clerical Beast is going to have 14 hit points that I'm going to have to work through before flipping over to his Phase 2 side. He's also going to have his own special deck of cards for each one of the phases. So during Phase 1, we'll be using the Phase 1 cards, and then once he flips over, obviously we'll be using the Phase 2 cards. There's a couple important things with this. First off, once the hunters do enough damage to defeat him for his Phase 1, if there's any excess damage, that is not carried over to Phase 2. So if he had 12 hit points and we ended up doing 4, bringing it up to 16, then he would only take the 14, flip his card over, and the other 2 points are simply lost and discarded. Another important thing with this are the phase cards. So with these, each one of them is going to list a different attack or different effect that the players are going to have to resolve. And once all of the cards in this deck are gone, then you'll reshuffle them if you need to start again. And the last type of action a player can perform is to enter the Hunter's Dream. In order to do this, just like any other action, you'll discard a stat card to your discard pile, and then you're going to take your Hunter and place it in the Hunter's Dream section on the hunt board. There's one other way a player can enter the Hunter's Dream, and that's if the player loses all of their hit points. In that situation alone, the player is also going to lose any Blood Echo tokens they've accumulated up to this point. In either situation, whether a player voluntarily or involuntarily enters the Hunter's Dream, their turn is immediately over, and then they're going to resolve 6 steps that are done in order. The first step is to move the hunt marker 1 space on the hunt track. Now, if this places the hunt marker into a red space, then you're going to immediately interrupt your process and move straight into a reset. And I'm going to cover this a little bit later in the video. But for this example, we did not, so we don't have to worry about that. From there, the second step is that you're going to gather up all of your stat cards, whether they are in your hands, on your trick card, or in your discard pile, and gather them into a single deck. From there, then you're going to discard any of the Blood Echo tokens that you have, and this is only going to be done again if you voluntarily entered the Hunter's Dream. If you were in the Hunter's Dream because you were killed, you won't have any Blood Echoes at this point. This is a section that must be done, so if you have Blood Echoes, you must discard them at this point, and then for each Blood Echo you discard, you get to choose one of the upgrade cards that is shown on the Hunter's Dream section. When you select one, so let's say we take this one here, you would immediately refill your selection. That way then if you have additional Blood Echoes to spend, you'll gain additional card, but you'll have a selection of 4 cards at all times. Once a player has completed collecting any new stat cards that they're allowed to, now it is time for them to choose whether or not they want to incorporate that into their deck. In order to do this, the player must discard a card from their deck for each card that they wish to add, as a player can never have more than 12 cards in their deck at any time. You can also choose to discard new cards that you just gained, but with this situation, we definitely want to include this. So I'm going to go ahead and choose, I'll go ahead and get rid of this strength card and include this one here. Any cards that you are discarding, you can go ahead and remove those from the game and add them back to the box. Once you've completed that, then go ahead and shuffle up your new deck of cards. You can also reset your firearm if it has been used or any other rewards that you've used currently. Then if you have a frenzy or poison token, go ahead and discard those back to the general supply. If you have taken any damage at this point, then go ahead and reset your health back to its starting 6 hit points. And then finally, at the beginning of the next round, you'll redraw your hand size as normal. And then during your turn, at the beginning of your turn, you'll choose which side of your trick weapon you want to start with. And then finally, you'll place your hunter on one of the lamp spaces anywhere on the board. This means, unfortunately, if for whatever reason you're killed before you get to take your turn during a round, you will skip that round and not be able to take your turn until the following round. So you want to do your best to avoid that situation. Once a player has completed their hunt turn, either by running out of stat cards to be able to do actions or choosing not to use any additional cards, then they are going to move into the second step of their phase, which is the enemy activation. Again, you do not have to use all of your stat cards, as you might want to save some of those for when the enemies activate. So during this step, each of the enemies is going to activate on tiles that are connected to the active hero's tile in a plus sign. Now, there is one exception to this, which is that they must be connected, which means that the tile itself must be connected with another tile that has the exit points, so both sides have to have it. So, for example, with our active hunter here, these 2 tiles are connected as they have those points. These 2 tiles are connected, but these 2 are not, as neither one of them have the exit points, which both of them would have to have them in order to be connected. So this group over here will not activate. Once you've determined that, then you'll move on to activating each enemies within each group. So our yellow enemies will activate first, then it'll move over to our red enemies, and finally our purple enemies. With the yellow enemies, which are these Scourge Beasts, you would activate each one of those that are able to activate, again, based on where they are on those tiles. So this Scourge Beast over here would not activate, as it is too far away from our active hunter. So let's go ahead and move into our example of this. So our Scourge Beast here is going to activate, and anytime an enemy activates, it is going to move 1 space towards the active hunter, and then if it is in the same space as the active hunter, it will attack. So with our Scourge Beast, he will move. Now they do have a special rule which allows them, when activating, they get to move up to 2 spaces, but he only needed to move 1 to our active hunter. At this point, then you would conduct an attack action as normal, where our hunter will start off by playing an attack card. Now this is the exception to the original example that I showed you, as in the enemy turn, you don't have to play a attack card if you don't want to. Say you don't have any, or you choose to save like a dodge card to dodge the enemy's attack. You do not have to play an attack card. So, but within this example, let's go ahead and say that our hunter does. He wants to try to finish this enemy off, so he's going to play that action there. So at this point, then we would reveal our enemy card, and it's an ability, so we have to resolve our enemy's ability. So with the Scourge Beast, it is a slow attack, and it says before the hunter's attack is going to spawn 1 Scourge Beast in this place. Now this is going to happen only if the hunter's attack is also slow. If the hunter would have done a faster attack, then you would resolve that first, again, before resolving this. But it isn't, so in this situation they are tied, which normally means they are done simultaneously. But again, with this, it is going to happen before the hunter's attack, so a new Scourge Beast is going to be placed into that space. From there, then we'll resolve the hunter's attack, which he does 3 damage, plus an additional one for 4, which eliminates that Scourge Beast. So they basically just traded positions, and he will get a Blood Echo token. Then we would move on to the next one. So now this Scourge Beast is going to attack because now it is out there. So again, the hunter at this point does have a card, but he's going to hold off on that and see what happens first. So we're going to reveal the card, and it is a basic. So at this point, he could choose to either play the dodge as the quick attack, which is the same speed, so he would dodge that effect, or he could use his firearm, which says that when an enemy makes a basic attack, which this is a basic, you can automatically stagger that enemy so the enemy would not deal any damage. So we'll go ahead and say that our hunter uses the firearm in this situation. Might not be the best choice. It would probably have been better just for him to dodge that attack, but just so that we cover all these different things. So at this point, then the enemy has been staggered. Its attack does not go off. Now, before moving on, there's one other important thing I want to mention with this is with the Scourge Beast, its ability, it's not an attack itself, so you could not perform a dodge action to dodge that ability. It's simply listing the speed that ability is resolved within. So from there, that completes all of these Scourge Beasts that are on the board that are going to activate at this point, so then we would move on to the next group, which are the Hunter mobs. So again, with this mob, it is not connected, so it will not move. And then anytime you have an enemy that's in the same space as a hunter, the only time it's going to move away from that hunter is if it can get into a space with the active hunter. So with this mob only moving one space, it will not move into the hunter's space, and so it will not activate and move at all. From there, that is the end of all the hunter mobs, so then we would move into the final group, which are the minions. So we have one over here that is connected, so it is going to move one space towards the hunter, and then this one up here will not move again as it is not in a connected tile with the hunter. So at that point, that would finish off the hunter's enemy activation round. There's a couple other things I want to point out. So first off, if for whatever reason a hunter is moved or an enemy is moved where it would be able to activate at that point, even out of sequence, then you would handle that. So let's say, for example, for whatever reason, this hunter was moved into this space. Now, all of a sudden, both of these enemies are within the hunter's activation, and so you would go back and handle those even though we were past that with the hunter's minion. So you would activate the Scourge Beast and that minion up there as well. Another important thing is if a hunter is eliminated before all the enemy groups activate, you would stop at that point. So let's say that the Scourge Beast up here eliminated this active hunter, and at that point, all the other enemies that would have activated will not, as there is no active hunter anymore. At this point, that hunter's turn is over, and you'd move on to the next hunter of your choice that has not gone yet this round. For the sake of this video, I'm going to say the purple hunter has already taken her turn, and so all of our hunters have activated, and so this is the end of the round. At this point, you'd move into a new round where you'll follow a couple of steps before moving back into player activation. First off, you're going to move the hunt track marker forward one space on the hunt track. If it lands on a red space, again, you're going to resolve a reset. I'm going to cover that in just a second. From there, then each player is going to draw back up to their starting hand size of 3 cards, and they can also choose to discard any stack cards that they currently have that they have not used yet this round if they want to, before redrawing. Once both players have redrawn their starting hand size of 3 cards, then you would move into a new round, again selecting one of the hunters to start with their activation. Alright, so the next thing I want to talk about is resetting. So anytime your hunt track marker moves onto a red space, you have to do a reset. And there's a number of steps with this you're going to follow in order. First off, all non-boss enemies are going to be removed from the map. So you would go ahead and take off all of the enemies that are not bosses. And with this, all the health, any hit points that they have are also going to be removed. Next, any consumable spaces that need tokens will have new tokens placed on them. So if you've already gathered those, then you would place new ones on there. If you have not, then you'll simply leave the tokens that were there. From there, then you're going to respawn all enemies related to missions, if any, and then replenish all spawn points on the map, beginning with those closest to the hunters. So we would go ahead and refill these points with enemy mobs based on their starting spots. So we would fill up all of those. We have a minion there. There's another mob boss here. Scourge Beast there. One here and one there. And the final thing is that boss enemies are not removed from the map, but all of their health is healed. If they are in phase 2, they are not going to go back to phase 1. There's only a couple more things I need to cover, the first of which are fog gates. So there are going to be certain missions that will include fog gates, and those are going to instruct you how to do them, but normally you're going to place a fog gate on each one of the exits on a tile, and then if that tile has a lamp, you'll place a broken lamp token on there, and then any enemy groups that were in there before the mission was stated are removed as well. So let's say, for example, this mission includes the mob, so this would be placed in there as that is part of the mission, but any other enemy groups that are in there beforehand are removed. From that point on, until the fog gates are lifted, there's a number of different rules that are going to come into play. First off, the hunters can never exit through fog gates. The only way that hunters can leave this tile is through the hunter's dream, but hunters can enter in through fog gates. So our hunter over here could move into this tile to help our other hunter out if she wanted to. Another important thing are with the broken lamp tokens. So a hunter can never enter into a tile that has a broken lamp token. Another important thing are that enemies cannot enter or exit through fog gates. So for example, with this hunter here, if she moves in, this enemy would pursue, but it would have to stop before it enters through the fog gates. And when hunters activate enemies during the second step of their phase, enemies that are outside of the fog gates would not activate. It would only be the enemy group that is in there for the active hunter that would activate. This is also going to be true during resets. So if you have to do a reset and there are enemy groups that are on there, such as like with this tile, if that was in here instead, you would not spawn those enemy groups in there during a reset. You would have to handle the enemy within there. And this mission card is going to state other things such as getting new insight tokens or healing or whatnot. And that is going to be dependent on the mission you're playing. And finally, again, the mission is going to state when you remove fog gates, but when it is the time to remove them, you'll remove all the tokens from the map, and you're also going to clear the broken lamp token from there at that point as well. The one other thing I want to point out with enemy groups in mission cards, some of them will require you to place insight tokens on them. And anytime that enemy group would take enough damage to eliminate it, instead you would remove an insight token. With this situation, I've seen a number of things come up where if you remove an insight token, does that stop that enemy group from performing its attack that round? That is not the case. The enemy actually does not die. It is getting this insight token removed, but you would still carry out any attack that enemy has already set up. There's also two important notes with the final space. So first off, when the players reach the final space on the track, that is going to trigger the last round in the game. So if the players do not complete their mission by the end of this last round, the game is over and the players have lost and will have to restart the campaign. The other thing is, during this last round, this is a restart space, so you'd have to resolve that as normal. And during the round, if for whatever reason you are required to move the token, and you cannot obviously move it any farther, so instead of being able to move it, you're going to follow a reset for each one of those situations that come up. Well, I hope you found that video helpful. If you have any questions or comments, leave those in the comment section below and I'll do my best to answer them. And check in the description as well, as I'll update if there's any rule corrections or anything I need to do. As always, thank you so much for taking the time to watch my videos and leave me feedback on them. I do really appreciate it and I take into account everything you say to make the best possible videos. Until next time, I'll see you later.